I'm Space Dolphin, or Jay if you want to use real people names. I'm an illustrator, a 3D modeler, and a writer, and I make the Hat Boy mod for Mass Effect 3, which is a mod where the player's Shepard character and Joker can have a romance. I have experience with various digital animation suites, and I went to university to learn how to do that, but don't worry, I went to university so you don't have to, and I'll try to explain things so that even if you have no experience with any of that sort of stuff, you too can try to make sense of FaceFX editing for Mass Effect. So, because my project is based in Mass Effect 3 as opposed to the other two games, and at the time of this video I'm still working on the original trilogy's release of my mod, that's what I'm working with here. But all this knowledge is translatable in terms of Legendary Editions 3 as well. 2's system is nearly identical, and 1's is similar in theory, but I have no experience with it directly. So, now that you have a basic idea of who I am and what this is going to do for you, let's dive in.
Yeah. So, I don't really have much experience with this. Probably obvious by now. Crazy, I know.
FaceFX is really kind of its own thing. It's an animation assistant tool for Unreal Engine that helps in the creation of facial animation and lip sync, as you might have guessed. It was originally made by OC3 Entertainment, and BioWare made some modifications to it for use with their own internal tools. FaceFX was used in the Dragon Age series and in Mass Effect to create baseline facial animation performances that human animators then tweaked by hand. It can analyze sound and produce auto-generated mouth movements. It has a library of expressions and gestures that the animator can choose to apply to the character's performance. All in all, it's really neat, but it's a program that requires a substantially priced license to acquire. To my knowledge, no one in the community has access to the actual thing itself. So, what do we have access to then as modders? We have FFXE, or the FaceFX editor. It's all right here in this window. We can make brand new, completely custom FaceFX animations for use in the game, and we can freely edit any of the ones that exist. So, essentially, what FFXE, or I call it Fixie, does is give us the ability to provide instructions that the game's FaceFX system can read. The fact that we can do this at all is nothing short of incredible and is down to the efforts of a small number of very dedicated individuals in our community. For those of you who are comfortable with digital animation environments, some of these concepts will be really familiar, but there's sort of a couple caveats that make Fixie unique and kind of challenging at times. So let's get the big one out of the way. The original animators had access to automation tools. We do not. Everything we do has to be done by hand. Key by key, shape by shape, line by line, and blind. The only way to see our results is by booting the game up and seeing the affected line play, so making sure that you're properly set up to record your results and test iterations is kind of be something that I consider your business, but I'll explain how I go about it when I get to it. So, if that hasn't scared you off, good. Getting to grips with Fixie is something that can really lift the quality of your mod. Or, I mean, hey, in my case, make it even possible, so. Right. So, the screen layout. The biggest tip I can offer is one not everyone can do, but it will make your life a lot easier. If you can, use multiple monitors because you have a lot of information you're going to need to look at. It will get kind of messy, so take your time. In the bottom right of my screen, you can see that I've piped over some stuff from my other monitor. This is my most recent recording of the scene with the line we're editing today. I like to keep a visual reminder of what I'm working on and how it looked the last time I tweaked things. Underneath that is Audacity with the line's audio. I use Audacity because it's simple, it's free, and it also shows the audio file's timescale across the top, which is super valuable for our purposes. I'm assuming basic familiarity with the Legendary Explorer, or LEX, and basic familiarity with the dialogue editor. So, you need your conversation, open. You need your node's interp data, open. And you need the relevant line's FaceFX asset open, which would be this one right here. At this point, you may notice that my FFXE looks a little different than yours. That's because I use a dark Windows theme for massive edgelords like me who can't handle even a few white pixels, but don't worry about it, it's the same. The first thing you should look at is the animations column right here. So this contains every different animation present within the FaceFX NMSet file, or FXA for short. Each one of these, I call them tracks, works in tandem with everything else. Together, everything in this column stacks up to make a character do stuff with their face. So the first animations in the animation column are phonemes, which I'll get to in more detail later. Next comes orientation tracks, which again, I'll go into later. And then emotions and gestures, which, as you probably guessed, I'll get into later. So next, to the left, you have your lines column. This shows every FXA for every line spoken by that character in that conversation. It's gender specific, so if you're looking at lines spoken to a female shepherd or by a female shepherd, only lines that have F on the end will be seen here. Opposite for M, of course. Of note, this doesn't contain non-speaker face effects, so your stuff like reaction shots, stuff that doesn't have a voice associated with it, that's found somewhere else. Don't worry about it for now. Then here you have your info pane. This has some useful information if you know what you're doing with it. You can easily change what interp ID and FXA is associated with, and what its wise event path name is from here. If what I've just said sounds like some crazy nonsense to you, don't worry about it right now. And then lastly, we have the graph area, which is where most of the magic happens. The x-axis going up is how strong or weak an animation is. The y-axis going across is where it is in time. Terminology and concepts. Okay, so in this graph area, you'll see lines, peaks, and valleys with loads of dots. These dots are called keys. The lines are tangents. A key tells the computer that, at this point in time, the animation should be this strong on the face. The next key gives a different instruction. The computer traces a line between them, showing how it will transition between those 2 points. The motion that happens between these 2 points is called tweening. So sharp, jagged movements are quick and dramatic, so stuff like a blink. Long, smooth curves are slower transitions, so stuff like an emotional change. So what are phonemes? For humans, Asari, and also for Edie, the first 15 tracks are phonemes, and they all start with M underscore. Phonemes are, essentially, the shapes that a human mouth makes when it creates a sound. You'll see that here there's only 15 of them. That's because many sounds share the same shapes. If you've opened up an FXA to follow along and it has stuff like lip curl and whatever, that's an alien character like a Turian or a Solarian. Do not try to assign those to a human speaker. You will have a bad time. I don't have any experience with animating the alien facial effects, so if that's your goal, maybe you can make the next video. Today, we're focusing on humans. So I'm going to try and describe these in order. Okay, so M-E-E is the E sound. Yep, pretty self-explanatory. M-jaw plus is probably the most important phoneme. You can get away with so much stuff just by having good M-jaw plus. So the thing that's important to notice about Mass Effect 3 or 2, facial animation is it's not necessarily the most accurate system in the world. It's mostly about good landmarking. And what I mean by that is the big parts of a sentence that is most noticeable when somebody's talking. The big shapes, the things that you would sort of try and lip read along with listening to. Uh, that's what you want to look for. And that's what MJAW Plus is great for, because it controls opening the character's mouth and closing it to 0, but opening the character's mouth. Generally speaking, you're never gonna need to see stuff over 60. You usually go from 0, which is completely closed, to absolute maximum, like someone is screaming their fool head off, at 60. Generally, you're gonna see stuff in the 40 and below. As you can see here, this is a completely like vanilla file. And usually with good control of MJAW Plus, you can get relatively decent looking lines, even if you're not like so hot with understanding the rest of it. Especially if it's like from a distance or a profile shot, whatever. Also, getting used to understanding MJAW Plus, you will be able to like read along with a line and basically tell where things are. Like, this one is still at its vanilla values, which is, how did you even? Well, this is great. So, how did you even? Well, this is great. And you see, it's a bit weird, but you'll get used to it. Try moving your own face along with this kind of stuff as you try and learn it, and you'll go a good way to that. So that's MJAW Plus. Next, M-eh. So, is, kinda self-explanatory, but you can use it to sort of bridge the gap, I guess. Like, what I mean is, when characters say stuff that's like just pure vowel sounds, it sometimes looks a little flat. If you add a little bit of meh in there, it can help sort of transition into other shapes really easily. And you don't generally need to go super high on that unless you're doing like an H, which you can see right at the beginning of the sentence. There's a big value here. And then other stuff just seems to be like transitory things or little eh. So yeah, takes experimentation, but you'll get there. M-open. So this one isn't really necessarily for a sound. It's more of what I would call a modifier phoneme. And what it sort of does is just pull the lips a little bit apart. So if you're not getting the kind of shape that you need, or if you have a plosive, for example, p, b, things of this nature, you can use a little bit of M-open to kind of make the shape pop a little bit more. And I will explain how M-open works with other phonemes to create those plosives when I get there. M-O-W, or M-ow, as I call it, is, it's a pretty useful one. It's one of these big major landmarking ones that is very good to get to know. Generally, you're not going to see values above 60 for this one either. It's usually either really subtle or in the realm of 60. You will sometimes get like higher values than that, but it's pretty rare generally. So, how I generally use M-ow and stuff is things with a long woo sound that needs a tight sort of shape. You can also use it to help create your P sounds by sort of like drawing the lips close together. Stuff like that. M-f. Okay, it's f. I don't know how simple I can make that. But usually MF is a pretty high value and pretty slow to form. It's another landmark shape, and it is something that you generally want to give time to show up on the face, because I don't know what it is, but the animation it draws from just seems to be really kind of slow. So if you have a F that you need on the face, try to give it like 0.2 seconds, I would say. Whereas like a lot of phonemes and stuff will do fine with just like 0.10, which I have found is kind of like the average for how long a sound lasts typically, is like 0.1. But you want 0.2 or more for a F. You just do. And in the values of 90 or more, don't go over 1. So, th is, well, th. But I would be sparing with this one. It's usually the stuff that it handles can also be handled by M flap, and I'll get to that in a minute. But, so it sounds like soft th, so like thorn, thing, stuff like that, you would use this for. And I wouldn't have it above a value of 60 generally, because it's a really big shape, it's quick to form, and it can really like take over the rest of the mouth. So depending on what your next sounds are, it can go bananas. Like, just be careful with it. Okay. Is probably another one of these super important sounds. Is fairly versatile. It is used for all plosives, so that's things that cause a burst of air, like P or B, B, P, stuff like that. And of course, is also used. So what it does is it pulls your lips down to make a M sound. And when used in conjunction with other things, like if you set to about like 60, like it is around there, and then you give it a little bit of M open, like probably 0.11, and you give it a little bit of moo right before it, you'll get an excellent looking P sound. M at just 100% value does what's on the tin, and experiment with sort of slightly lesser values and M open to get B. M jaw minus is a weird one. It's directly related to M jaw plus, but it's way less useful. I only ever see it used in these tiny little values, just seemingly almost at random in vanilla files. Most of what you need to do in terms of animation can be done just with mjaw plus alone. I have barely ever needed to screw around with mjaw minus. I mean, I guess you could experiment if you have a shape that you really feel just needs to be pulled a bit tighter. I don't know, but don't worry too much about it is what I would advise to you, especially while learning. Just get rid of all the keys in it and ignore it. MN really does what's on the tin. It is a quick forming shape that brings up the tongue near the front of the teeth, but not in the same way as M flap. So MN is something that you will generally see pretty high in value, like 90 is close to 1. Pretty simple. ML is L, so it creates a sort of a curl of the tongue, and it also brings the lips a little bit forward. Kind of like U, but like less. It's pretty useful for stuff, but it's mostly an internal looking thing, so if your mouth isn't mega open, don't worry about it too much. MO is really versatile. It's good for just pulling the face open a bit. I mean, that sounds horrible, but yeah. It's generally for stuff like sounds, stuff like that. does what's on the tin. Generally doesn't go higher than like 80, but I've seen it at 100 before. But well, I say 100. What I mean is 1. Don't mistake me here. Yeah, generally it's that or less. MG is not G as in J, it's G as in K, K, G, stuff like that. It sort of just kind of opens the mouth a little bit and brings the tongue up at the back, pretty much. MZZ is another really versatile shape. You can use it for any sibilance, so s. I've also seen it used in place of ME. It really does depend on what you're trying to do. This has better response with a more closed jaw because it's like shows the teeth a little more, and that works with like if you're going Mamma Mia or something. I don't know. Yeah, pretty strong shape. You use it in the 80 to 60 range, I would say. You generally don't need to go higher than 80 with it. M flap is your T and D sounds. It just like brings the tip of the tongue right to the teeth. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the phonemes. Oh, hi, ferret. Womp womp. So something that I forgot to mention about ME sound, you don't need to go super high with it. Don't go over like 60 generally. The thing is it is a super strong shape and it pulls the corners of the lips like way out. Like a few times when I've needed to look at other people's FaceFX or even some vanilla FaceFX that like I don't know weren't finished or whatever like that, and the lips were just absolutely going bug nuts. It's because of an overabundance of ME or like just people being a little bit too liberal with it, I guess. Keep your meat like really gentle. You don't need to go crazy with it, and don't overuse it because yeah, it'll end up doing weird stuff to the rest of the shapes. And just once you understand a little bit more about how it interacts with the other shapes, you will be able to spot it like that. You'll just know, oh, that's too much me. Okay. Phew. I know that's a lot to take in, but there's a lot of ground to cover here. So, orientation tracks are present on all FXAs that I've looked at so far. Orientation head pitch deals with looking up and down. Roll is tilting side to side. Yaw is looking side to side as if you're shaking the head. So entering positive values moves the head to the right and negative to the left. Some animations have opposite effects in this way, and it can be a nice and sort of cheap and dirty way to get a mirrored effect, but more on that when it's relevant. Usually these orientation keys remain at 0, even when a character is seen looking around. This is because their movements are normally controlled by other tracks, called E gestures, which I will get to. Gaze, eye, pitch, and yaw are pretty self-explanatory. They just deal with rolling the eyes around. I do see these moved around sometimes, but usually, again, they're typically controlled by E gestures. So, emphasis, head, pitch, roll, and yaw is sort of like orientation, but it's more like giving a little bit of a bump with your head when you're talking. If you've ever seen the old Flintstones or Hanna-Barbera cartoons, whenever they're talking and their head sort of goes up and down as they're doing it, sort of like that. Head pitch is usually what controls that. Usually in values of around -2, -3, or +2, depending on what direction you want. So eyebrow rays is one of those things that's really weak for some reason. Most animations you want to stay between a value of 0 and 1, But with eyebrow rays, I usually find results like what I'm aiming for in the range of like 3 or 4, as in the whole number 4, like 400%. Putting it into the negative doesn't really do much though. If you want to control just one eyebrow, you'll have to find the relevant gesture. Speaking of gestures, here they are. If you are already familiar with adding animations and gestures into a conversation node through the Matinee editor, then it's worth noting that many of these gestures you can find in FXAs are the same thing. They just offer much finer control in terms of varying speed and holding an animation in place. Ambient performances can sometimes be found as gesture tracks inside FXAs, as well as things like weight shift. Usually, they are keyed at 0 or barely above it, and I'm not really sure if they have much of an effect. Emotions are something of a mystery, and isn't that a great philosophical question? These emotion tracks are prefixed with WB, S, B, Y, and sometimes a combination of them. Apparently, this has something to do with BioWare's expressions library and how it interacts with RoboBrad, which is their internal facial model. Thank you. That interacts with the auto generation systems. This is apparently similar to the RoboBrad that can be found within the Dragon Age Origins official modding tools release from the pre-EA days. I wish. But investigations are ongoing. And by that, I mean it's likely, but those tools don't run on anything other than Windows 7, and I am not a programmer. Moving on. Different emotion tracks affect different parts of the face, but I can't understand any sort of logical consistency to what. Generally what happens is I pull in some tracks from a node that has the right kinds of emotions inside it, I play around, and I hope for the best. Spray and pray, but with keys and tangents. So, that works as a basic overview of what's going on and what's where. Kinda. Controls and more concepts will be explained as they become relevant, because wow, clicking through a graph isn't much fun, and you've totally watched me do it for half an hour already. Seriously, take a tea break. I'm having one. Let's set up for the lesson. The line we are animating today is...
You can't do this to me. I'm too cool to get choked up.
Yes, it is an AI-generated line. It is not as good as if a real, breathing, living Seth Green said it, but you'll have to forgive me for not exactly having the man on speed dial, okay? I did my best. I picked this line because it's a little under 3 seconds long. It's pretty quick, and it has an option for an emotional transition, which could be fun. So, let's see what it looks like in-game right now.
You can't do this to me. I'm too cool to get choked up.
So, it looks pretty flat and, like, kind of just right now. He's got some decent head movements, I suppose, going on here, but it's just sort of boring. It's not really what I want out of the line. It's only a quick line, as I say, but we could punch it up a little bit. It's not a bazillion miles off even with the lip sync that we already have from the other line, which will happen sometimes. There are occasions where I have just left the line that I've stolen with the lip sync in because it basically fits. But most of the time you're going to have to be hand doing it the whole way. So don't count on that. So, there's a few different ways to accomplish what we might want to do here, and they range from quite simple to quite complex. Let's say, for instance, we want to capitalize on the fact that our replaced line's new audio almost fits the old animations. We just want to adjust the data to fit the gaps in our audio speech a little better. The way we do this is first by taking a look at our audio's waveform. Note the period of silence spanning from 1 second to about 1.3. I'll just expand the view of Audacity here so you can better coordinate a little. Yeah. See? A little bit of silence going on here. In the Lines column, navigate to your line's FXA and right-click it. A little menu with some stuff appears. Offset all keys after time is a tool that allows you to push and pull entire sections of the line forwards or backwards in time. This affects all tracks in the FXA at once. So, enter your start time. All the data in the FXA past this point in time will be affected. I like to choose nice even numbers as best as I can because, well, we have no undo here, and sometimes it's easier to manually undo something than to reload it. So I'm going to say everything past 1 second. I'm going to push everything forward by 0.3 seconds, just to give the silence a little bit more time before the animation starts up again for the second half of the line. And done. Now you can see the gap between that is just a little bit longer. And that's pretty much what we want. If that's all you need to do, then you're done. Chances are, though, you won't be done with something as simple as that, but it's good to account for all use cases. Let's say, for the sake of argument, we like the placement of everything in our FXA in terms of lip movements, but we want an emotional change to start triggering at a different time, or a blink, or whatever, a specific element. We like the way it looks, just not where it is. You can do a similar process that only affects an individual track. Find the track you want in the Animations column. On the graph area, right-click to bring up a context menu. Offset all keys after this point works very similarly to the previous option, except that you don't need to enter a start time. It gets this information depending on where you clicked in the graph area. I want him to blink like a lot sooner in the line, so I'm going to right-click just before the first part of the movement and offset it all by -1. Now he'll blink a full second earlier in the animation. You might have noticed something a little peculiar as I click through the different tracks. Watch the time graph and look at the proportions of the different curves. They're all a little bit crazy, right? Well, the reason for this is that by default, Fixie shows tracks proportionately to their first key and last key wherever those are in the file. So, you'll get things that begin only 3 seconds in, or they finish only 3 seconds in. This view can be useful, however, the first thing I tend to do when looking at a line is to check this box up in the right corner of the graph area, labeled Fixed Time Span. You can choose to lock the viewport to a specific start or end time, and this forces all the tracks to appear proportionately on the timeline. This means that with this box checked, everything appears nice and orderly, and by keeping your eye in the same place, you can see how different tracks are doing different things at the same point in time. Creating a simple animation is easy. A blink is probably the best way to start, and it allows me to go a little in depth about the concept of controls, key placement, and overall eye control, which is really important for good acting. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this blink that's already there just because, starting fresh is good. Right-click on the track, delete all keys. It might take a second to refresh. All you need to do is click onto a different track and then click back and it'll be gone. So, I have decided that I want to have him close his eyes over the words, "Can't do this to me." By listening to the audio, I can tell he says this from about 0.1 to 1 seconds.
Can't do this to me.
Right? So, find roughly the right place on the graph. For around 0.10 is going to be somewhere around here. Right-click. Choose Add Key with 0 weight. This drops a key at exactly 0 weight value, or strength of the animation if you will, right where you are in time. Now drop one a little bit after 1 second, so probably about right here. Now drop one roughly in the middle of that. Click your key in the middle and drag it upward. Blink is an animation that only needs to go to a maximum of 1. And it looks like I dragged it a little too far. So his eyelids might start like crashing into his face or something horrible like that. And we're not making a gamer poop, we're being serious here. So select it, right click it, choose set value, and make it 1. Use this to easily correct keys to exact values. Similarly, you can do this to correct time. Let's move the ending key a little bit sooner. Let's have it go at exactly 0.9. And there you have it. As it stands, Joker's gonna slowly close his eyelids over all these words. Sometimes, this is what we want. In fact, for nice emphatic blinks, making them a little slow is pretty good. You can get a lot out of shifting an expression around just by playing with how quickly or slowly a person blinks or how high or low they keep their eyelids. This right here, as it is, will probably look a little weird and slow. What I want him to do is quickly close his eyes, hold them closed, and then slowly release them. The overall movement is going to be pretty quick, but you have to think in terms of an eye blink. So the way I'll do that is by adding another key to sharply alter the shape of this curve. Add key. Now you can see that the shape is very different. In the space of about 0.1 seconds, he goes from eyes completely open to eyes completely shut, keeps them closed, then slowly releases them. Well, a little more slowly. This is pretty much what I want.
You can't do this to me. I'm too cool to get choked out.
So, that was an iteration with only the changes we've done so far. Altered a blink, and pushed the lip sync forward to better account for the gap in the audio. Adding the blink already does a lot to make him look a little more expressive. I've gone ahead and added another one right over the word cool. I think it will help keep him from looking like he's staring her down. Speaking of Joker and staring people down, this is something kind of specific to him, but his model's eyelids at 0 are really wide open, and this can kind of make him look like weirdly intense sometimes. I do this with other characters sometimes too, but for Joker, I often set his eyelids to around 0.15 instead of just straight 0. It gives him a more relaxed, warmer look. For an example, have a look as I scrub through this little scene here. This is like the vanilla shot of post-Bezier. And you can see his eyes are pretty wide open. Like, it's not super great. I understand that he's supposed to be kind of irritated in this, but often, even with other expression sets, his eyes will just be like that wide, just by default, and it's really sort of weird. It doesn't look excellent. That's also a vanilla shot. God, it's horrible. I hate that shot so much. And yeah, you can really see what I mean about the eyes just being super wide. And sometimes, yeah, that's what you want out of an expression. And most of the time, it, like, really isn't. Let me try and show you an example of one that has better eyes than that. I mean, as a pure straight example, have a look at what I did to alter that shot. You can see that I have lowered the eyelids, made him actually look off to the screen where she's going, and just a bunch of different stuff to try and calm that shot down. But, yeah. it might help, depending on what character you're animating, to just kind of like lower the eyelids a little bit. And what I mean is literally just like this. Change it to like 0.15, which is sort of what I do for Joker. And then all the bottom keys to 0.15. And that will help his like face just look a little nicer. So back to our line. At this point, I'm sort of thinking I want to bring in like a gesture here. Nothing too much, but I think I want him to smile. But if we have a look in the animations column, we can see he doesn't seem to have a gesture for that. Yeah, he's got an amusement animation set going on, and I could spend 5 million years playing around with these values to see if it'll do what I want. Or I could import an animation track from somewhere else. A few things to note about this process that kind of sucks. In order to bring in an animation that isn't within an FXA already, we have to find it from somewhere else and import it. For extremely long and boring technical reasons, there's no way to just be like, oh yeah, I want E-gesture do the thing and find it on a drop down. So, here's what you gotta do. You gotta find a node that has in its FXA the gesture that you want. You gotta open up. You gotta find the thing. And then open up your other one. Don't confuse them. That's happened to me way too many times. And then drag and droppy. And poof, it populates at the bottom. So it populates with the exact information and timing as you had it in the thing that you pulled it from. That's either good for you or bad for you, depending on what you want, but either way, you now have the animation to play with. Okay, so top tip for super pros. As I'm going around doing things and editing like a huge conversation and finding expression tracks or gestures that I like, I'll sort of nominate one FXA among them to temporarily hold all the stuff I like. I'm all, oh, that's neat. I'll have that, and then just sort of dump it in the FXA file. Naturally, I'll work on whatever that one is last in the conversation. Just something to think about if you find yourself in a situation where you've sort of got to do 4 billion of these, and remembering where to find whatever track is a huge pain. Honestly, this animation as it is will probably work just fine. I think I'm going to set it to go a little later in the line though. Like 0.4. So smiles add a lot to the expression, but be careful with them. Be aware that they drastically affect the way the mouth moves, and so lip sync that looks fine without a smile can sometimes look really weird with one added into the mix. If that happens, just lower the intensity. I'm going to add a little bit of emphasis head pitch later on in the sentence. Oh, probably like... let's see, where are we at here? What's going on in this sentence?
I'm too cool to get choked up.
So probably actually around cool, I think. I think that'll probably work pretty well. Incidentally, I can then show you how to use the onion skin feature. So, onion skin, or reference layer as it's called in Fixie, is a tool to help you easily sync up tracks with one another. I'll be using it a lot later on when I start doing the lip sync. I've identified that I want to give him a little bit of a head bob from 1.6 to 1.9, and I want it to sync up roughly with the blink I told him to do. So, find blink, right click, set as reference curve. Now when I click around onto other tracks, it shows me exactly where blink is, proportionate to the track I'm working on. Very useful. So I'm just gonna head on over to emphasis head pitch, and you can see it shows me what's going on with that and also exactly where my blink is. So I don't even really have to think about it. Just add key, add key, add key. And then the thing with emphasis head pitch is you kind of need it to be pretty big numbers. So I'm gonna say -4, I think, actually. -4 should probably do it. Yeah, so that looks crazy huge on the thing, but it won't look too bad. It won't. So, right about now, the Funk Soul Brother, I am going to do an iteration. Let's see all the changes we've made so far, subtle though they are.
You can't do this to me. I'm too cool to get choked out.
Okay, well that's not looking too bad. There's a couple things here. Firstly, I think that head bump, I want to change that so that it's a little bit slower on the come down. I think it's a little bit quick. So how I'm going to do that is by using key slide. And what I'm going to do is click the end of the animation, hold shift, and then drag the key outward. And you can see the curve changing with my mouse. Now, the thing with this is that it will be a little bit laggy depending on a lot of different things, like your computer, how big your conversation is, all kinds of stuff. But it's generally pretty responsive, and it's useful for just little tweaks and fine adjustments where the number isn't necessarily super important. So the next thing that I noticed was that smile was probably a little bit intense for the lip sync. And what I'm going to do to change that is I'm going to not hold shift and then pull that down a little bit. And just, I'm going to keep that smile pretty subtle for the rest of the conversation. Now, what you might notice here is that that curve looks a bit weird. That's going to give a bit of a bumpy animation. That's not going to look super nice. So in the transition, what I'm going to do is click this, and you'll see this little bar here appears. That's called the Bezier Curve. And it allows you to change sort of the shape of the curve. So what I'm going to do is just kind of tilt it a little bit so that it's a nice smooth gradation all the way down. And that is going to help make that look nicer, and it's going to help him be able to talk through that smile a little bit more, I think. So even just with these like very subtle changes that we've done, not even touching any of the lip sync at all at this point, really, other than to just push it forward to accommodate the gap, is that it's already a much different performance than what we started with. And it's really simple, just lowering those eyelids, giving it a different expression, adding a little bit more to the head movement. Everything makes a difference, and it helps to bring the character more alive. And honestly, just a little bit of tweaking can go a long way with this game and with edits. So, what we've done already might be good enough for you if what you're doing is less intensive. Maybe you're just adding some punchiness to some vanilla FaceFX or whatever, or the new line you've added blessedly kinda fits whatever info you've had, as is the case with this one. But if you're in the situation I'm in most of the time, where you've got a completely new line and it doesn't fit at all and you need to kinda make it work, this is for you. Doing this is often easier than trying to mess around with vanilla FXAs trying to get them to fit. I know that sounds like madness, but trying to keep track of 15 different tracks and how much of a minute adjustment you've had to make to get one shape in line with your audio, and then having to do the same with the rest, it can make a person go insane. I've tried. It's easier to just nuke everything and start clean. So, first things first, in your lines column, find your FXA. Right-click it, delete all M lip sync keys. What this does is obliterate all the keys in the phonemes, these ones up here, and leaves everything else, our expressions, our gestures, everything, all the way that it is. The only thing it gets rid of is these puppies right up here. Okay, so around now is when you start learning exactly how patient of a person you are. So, first thing, I like to work on M-Jaw Plus first, just because it is the landmark shape. It is the thing that dictates everything else in the sentence, aside from this stuff. And it's just really good to do first. So, you need to look at your audio file and have a look at its exact length. In my case, mine is 2.70. So, I tend to put in my fixed time span, I start at around negative 0.5, so I can see a little bit before 0, and then I tell it to stop a little way after my actual sound file. So in this case, I've told it to let me see up to 4 seconds. And this is quite useful just cuz. So the first word that we're working on is U. And that will start a little bit before 0. 0 properly is right when the audio begins, but you have a little bit of time to set up your shapes beforehand by getting stuff to start before 0. Now, something that I also like to do is I work on things in segments of time of about 0.5. So I listen to about half a second's worth of audio, and then I try to place jaw keys accordingly. So in this case, we've got...
You can't do...
You can't do... So, if we think about this constructively, we need to start from a little bit before 0. So we plonk our key down here. And then, where's our jaw going to be at? In the middle of a do... How open is that going to be? And then when we figure that out, we can put at 0.5 roughly where that's going to be. I would estimate that you can't do... that feels like about 20 to me. Right. So now we know that you can't do has to fit into this section here. Gets a little bit complicated. But do remember that the average time for a sound is, I've guessed, about 0.1 seconds. This means that it's going to be tough to fit everything you think needs to fit into this section here. It's fine, abstract it out. Only focus on the things that you know make a big movement. Everything else, your brain will fill it in. It's not a big deal. So, if I look over at Audacity, I can actually see, by looking at the shape of the waveform, where generally the jaw closes, or where there's diction happening, like t, d, stuff like that. You can see where there's gaps, and this gives you a good indicator of the beginning and end of a word, things like that. So I'm guessing this is you, and then this is probably can't do is what I would guess that is. So let's see.
You can't do...
Exactly. You can't do. So point 10 is we're gonna have a G, MG, because let's set as a reference curve that. Gonna have MG because that handles the k sound. So I'm just gonna make that peak at... Hold on, why aren't you showing up? That's strange. Oh, it's because I didn't click the reference curve box. There you go, kids. There's a good lesson for you. Make sure that your program is told to do what you want it to do. That's always a good thing. So, I'm gonna say add key, and then add key, and then this is gonna spike up to be about 1. Nice. So, we've already got that in place. Let's see, you can't. So, I'm gonna say that the jaw is gonna be fairly closed at the same time as the G is happening. This means that I can have a little bit of an open going on up here. You can't Yeah, can. And I would say N and D are usually pretty low things. So can't. And then do. Maybe that needs to be a little bit higher in that case. You can't do. You can do. Yeah. Okay. So something to note as well, that when people start talking and they're still continuing a sentence, it's not actually very common that they fully completely shut their jaw. Things usually start zeroing out technically at 0.20. And then there's a slow fall off back to 0 when the word or sentence is finished. Don't be super quick to return to 0, or you'll get like really robotic looking weird jaw movements. It's just not great. So let's put some owl peeking at here. Yeah, let's edit this in real time. This is super exciting. I'm gonna say 60. Yeah, you can't do. And then we need an owl over here. I'm gonna say that one's probably a little bit stronger, maybe. Yeah, and then pop the N right here, where we can tell roughly the N is supposed to be. And like I said, don't focus too much on it being crazy accurate. It doesn't need to be crazy accurate. Just good landmarks will do you. I'm gonna put some M open in here as well, just to kind of pull his lips apart a little bit. And here too. So something for creating a Y sound is, yeah, you put some M-ow for the part of it, but E is used to set it up, so you, if that makes sense. So let's have a little bit of that going on. Put it about 60 maybe. Yeah, about 60. And then it goes to owl, which will sharply take it up. In fact, I'm going to just have it be a little longer to form there. And that will probably look a bit nicer. Hey, can you do the thing? Yeah, cool. So you can't do. D doesn't really, I mean, you could put M flap there, but honestly, like, listen to how quick it is.
You can't do.
You don't need that. Like, you just don't. Can't do, and then the next one is gonna be from 0.5 to 1 second.
This to me.
This to me. So, when we're thinking about this, that's a pretty low jaw value. So I think leaving it there is good. So, this to me, it ends on an E. About 30, I would say, maybe, or maybe less. Yeah, let's just, in fact, just keep it at 20, cause whatever. We're mavericks. We got this. If you do this and you have a reference curve and you're clicking around and making changes, it will kind of read the one that you're doing as having been the reference curve. Just like click off it and click back on it. It's fine. It's just, I don't know. I find it useful to keep it on because then I can see what changes I've made immediately. So if I don't like one or something, I can just kind of easily revert it back. Yeah, so this to me, and if we look at there, we can see exactly the shape. So this is a good shape to recognize, this here. That's an S. You'll see that quite a lot. This to me. So This involves a lot of just like saying noises out loud. This, okay, so sibilance is generally pretty low in jaw value. That's about 0.6, yeah? So, no, it doesn't need to be at 0 though. Like there. This to me. I don't know. Like that. And then always though, you want your M's and stuff to be pretty much on a low weight. Now, something that I like to do is I like to double key M's or plosives just so that it gives me a visual of where I know that they're going to be. So that when I do this and go to my M, I can see like it's got an extra little bit of length there. And then I'm like, oh yeah, it's going to be like a M or a plosive or whatever. So when I say that shapes are landmarks, it's also landmarks for you, not just like the thing. Boy, this part is unscripted. Can you tell? Okay. And then that's gonna be a E. Some people like to just like, you know, pop the key where they know the value is gonna be, but I find it's just a lot quicker to just kind of like drag it roughly where I want it and then like figure out what to do with my life later. Everybody has different working methods, but I find that's quickest for me. There was a this, wasn't there? Where was the this? That was at 0.5, so 0.5 is roughly here. Yes, that's right, because it's going into a S right there. So add keys. I love adding keys. It's my favorite thing to do. I mean, not really, but here we are. I would like to have an auto-generation system, but I don't have one. So in the absence of that, I gotta do it myself. Woo! Add key. 0 weight. Gosh, I would like a repeat action button like there is in Maya. I think you can like press G and it just like automatically does whatever you just did before. That would be pretty good. That's one thing that's great about this community though. You can actually put in feature requests and stuff for things like that. And the developers will actually listen to you. So that's really great. Alright, what do we got going on here? How's it cooking? You can't do this to me. To me. So there's gonna be a ooh here. Yep. Yeah, we're flying. We've got almost a second of this line that is what 2.7 long. So already pretty much half done, and it's been like what 5 minutes. I mean, I say that it's probably been longer than 5 minutes, like a lot longer, and I've just completely lost track of time. I'm gonna like put this clip in my timeline and it's gonna be like 15 minutes and I'm gonna be like, oh yeah. So yeah, keep your M open is kind of a low value because you don't really need them to be mega crazy. And yeah, that's where we're at for that. That's the thought process. Don't worry too much about weird sharp keys on your M jaw. That happens like all the time. So while that kind of a curve would look not so great for like a smile appearing on someone's face, it's gonna look fine for just flapping the jaw around. You'll learn what you need to do.
You can't do this to me. I'm too cool to get choked out. You can't do this to me. I'm too cool to get choked out.
Okay, so in conclusion, I hope you learned a lot. I hope you had some fun, if it's possible to have fun doing FaceFX. I mean, I don't know. I think it's kind of fun, but um, I'm also weird, so. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I can always make some kind of clarification in future. I haven't covered all of the features of stuff like how to import and export FXAs, but like honestly, this video is sort of long enough. So, thank you very much and happy animating.